see which one I've got loaded here. Application when they run the desktop. The Toast will show you messages. You're limited by a few things with Toast for security reasons. One, you've got a set width of 400 by 100 for height and width. You cannot exceed that for your message. You can put any content you want inside of the Toast. So you can make it different colors, you can put paths and shapes, buttons, you can interact with it. Usually you'll see things like messages in here. I've seen a really cool demo that we did with eBay where we actually put a path list box inside of the Toast. So it looked like a big wheel showing you different messages. It was really kind of cool. And the Toast also has a border around it. It's a 1-pixel border around the entire thing for security reasons, so you can't be doing any spoofing. And then you set the duration for that Toast to show in milliseconds. Pretty easy to do. And then when the Toast comes up, in a demo you'll see in a few minutes, it looks like this. We'll show a music player. And in the music player, when it's playing a song, it actually pops up information about what song it's So we'll have a Twitter app that's going to check the network status to see when we're up, when we're down, because I hate when I'm using an application and it's supposed to hit the internet and it just sits there. And I want to know why it's got a problem. So to do this, we're going to listen for some events. Did the network status change? Do I have connectivity? Did the install state change? Is it installed on my local desktop or is it running in the browser? This is key because when somebody runs your app, if it runs both in the browser and out of browser on your desktop, this way you can check the status to see, is it running out of browser right now or is the user running it inside the browser? So I've got a little app we can run that'll show this. And in that application, after I install it, you can see a little red light or a green light to see if the network has been detected, one way or the other, using some simple data binding. Is it running out of browser or is it running in the browser? And is it installed or not? So let's take a quick look at that application. All right, so first you'd run it from here, and then you'd install it from the application as it comes up. We'll miss sometimes when you're creating an application for out of browser. So installing updates, you need to subscribe to an event, usually in your constructor, to say when an update is available for this application, please download it for the user. So you then fire off an asynchronous message to check for the update, automatically downloads it, and then you tell the user, hey, there's a new update of this application available, please restart your application, and it'll be different events. But it really gets more powerful when you get into the elevated permissions, the elevated trust that you can do with out-of-browser applications. So in these elevated trust situations, there's a couple things you need to do. And the first thing you need to do is you need to tell the application that you want to require that when this application runs out of browser, it's going to run with this elevated trust scenario. So you're going to do things now that normally in a browser you cannot do in a web-based application. So first, we're going to talk about the automation factory. The automation factory is a class that allows you to invoke different objects on the desktop that you cannot do unless you're running an elevated trust. For example, you can invoke anything that's got a COM interface, so like Office's Excel product, or Word, or Outlook. Or if you have your own API that's got a COM interface on the desktop, you can actually invoke that as well. And we'll look at some keys with running the automation factory and how you can do some really cool things. You can actually look at files, folder structures and files. You can read the files. You can edit the files. So you've got file access when you're running out of browser too, with elevated permissions. You get the full file path on open and save dialogues, as long as the user has permissions to get to those locations, of course. So if the user running the application can get to a particular location, you get full file path access. Custom window Chrome. This is one of the smallest features we put into Silverlight, but one of the most requested, is when people run on the desktop, they want to get rid of that crazy border that we put around the application that we just saw in that silver twit demo I showed. You can get rid of the border or put rounded borders on there. So look at how you can do that and some cool applications you've written using it. Zap signing. So in Zap signing, you can digitally sign and put certificates associated with your Silverlight application. So when users download it, they get notified that there's a new version of the application. Here it is, you can install it, and it gives them a friendly message saying, hey, this is from John Papa, everybody likes him, would you like to install this on your desktop? Or, if it's not signed, it gives the user a little more of a warning message saying, it's unknown who this comes from, we haven't verified it with the publisher, do you want to install it? And that's the message we got a moment ago when I tried to install my app, because I did not sign it. We've also got a feature we call the silent install option. Silent install is basically a command line that you can use without a browser. It's slauncher.exe. This is the executable that all out-of-browser applications run under. So if you go to Task Manager, you'll see that. So you can not only see that it runs out-of-browser applications with the launcher, but you can launch applications and install them using slauncher. This is great for, let's say you've got your application on a USB drive or a CD. You want to distribute it to people, not through the internet. You can actually put it on the CD or USB drive, have somebody install it on their machines using that, and then during that install process, you tell it where it will get future updates from, because it probably won't be a CD, it might be the internet. So during that command line, you set these flags, it'll automatically install the application and set it up to be auto-updating. It's another cool feature we've had. So let's start off with talking about automation. First, with automation, since we're talking in this case about running COM objects in this version of Silverlight, you first want to check to see if COM is available. So there's a method that you can check, a property you can check on the API to see, is Automation Factory available on this machine? And then you create your COM object using some features in C#4, like the dynamic keyword. Pretty simple to do. Now, a couple things you can do once you do this is inside your code, you can push objects or data to the COM object. So if you open up like an email, you can push information from your Silverlight app to the email. Now, what I find even cooler is you can also listen to events from the COM application. So it's not just one-way communication where you're launching something and fire and forget. You're launching something and then you're listening for events. So you can use the full API in the COM interface to listen to and talk to whatever you're launching. So simply, the code to do this is the Automation Factory class. You check, is it available? If it's not available, you want to skip this code. Now this code here will run and compile without any bugs or any breaks because it's using late binding basically. So here we've got the dynamic keyword in C#4, which basically says, I don't know what the real type of this thing is. I'm using COM. I'm going to go ahead and defer that till execution time when I run over this line of code. But for now, I'm just telling you, I'm going to have this thing invoked. I'm going to call it Word. Automation Factory, please go create it. And you need to know the name of the COM object that you can invoke. So here we've got Word application. And you do need to know a little bit about the application. You need to know the API has a documents.add method. We're going to create a document. We're going to paste something into that document, and then we're going to quit. So little things like the IE browser through the API, if you invoke the Internet Explorer content through the COM automation, what you'll have to do is after you actually create IE, this is something, again, I always forget to do, is after you created it and set your URL and navigate to it, you have to do the show method to make it visible. Some of the APIs in COM for the Office products don't actually show. And again, this isn't limited to just Office. This is for any COM object you have. One nice thing about the is available flag is it doesn't just check if it's available on that machine for COM, but it also checks to see if you're out of browser. Because if you're not out of browser, then you're not going to work either, even if COM's there. So it's going to check, are you out of browser? Is it available? Otherwise, there's another check you could also do. It's redundant in this case, but you can also check the app.current to see if it's running out of browser or not. There's another flag. And again, this is all unknown at design time. So I'm going to show a demo that wraps a lot of these elevated features together. But first I'm going to go through what the features are, and then we'll show you how they all tie together. So let's say we're building a music application, and we want to use that application to load music files off the person's hard drive and play them. To do that, we have to be able to see the hard drive. So therefore, we're automatically into that elevated permissions, elevated trust mode of out of browser. So to do that, luckily, I can look at the My Documents folders, or the music folders, or the video folders, or the pictures folders on the machine. This works again for Mac or for Windows. So you've got those permissions, and you can look at those music files on the machine using this file access. So very simply, in this case, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to go check my environment, get folder path. And notice up here, I've got the My Pictures enumerator. There's special folders that are enumerated that we can check to see, hey, do we have access here? If the file exists that we're looking for, we're going to delete it. So not only can we check to see if things exist right here, we can check to get that folder path. We can also delete files. And then when we're done, we're going to open a stream, and we're going to create that file. We wanted to. And here we're just going to do it based upon the user's access. So you can't open file dialog. If the user doesn't have access to a network location, you can't just automatically save to it. It's based upon what that user can. Borders on the application. And I'll show you what that looks like. Pretty simple to do. But if you do that, first thing you're going to notice is after you remove the borders, well, the borders were kind of key for sizing the window. You don't have that feature anymore. You don't have the feature to close it. You don't get the little boxes up in the right-hand corner. So you now have to handle the events for how am I going to close this application? How am I going to allow the user to drag it around because there's no border and title bar anymore in the application? Pretty simple to do. Here's a demo I'm going to show. trust us. So in Zap signing, there's a few things that come into play. You can sign your Zap. It's very, very easy to do. You can apply to have elevated trust. So in this case, it only applies to elevated trust applications. It's the only time you want to sign your Zaps. It doesn't really matter for Sandbox. And it checks to make sure you've got the matching certificates. So you've got to choose your certificate that you're going to use for the application. And if the certificate matches when the application runs, then it'll come up as verified. If your certificates expire, there'll be a problem with the application. It'll notify you. This affects updates. This is key. Because if you install an elevated trust application that doesn't use the Zap signing, updates won't automatically be applied. Why? Because it's not a trusted certificate that's out there, so the user is not we're not going to automatically install something on the user desktop that's from an unknown publisher. So if you're going to auto-update your application, you're going to want to get a certificate. There's a lot of places you can get them relatively inexpensive. To do this, in the properties page of the project, there's a simple checkbox to sign the Zap, and then you can go select your certificate from the store or from a file. If you've already installed the certificate on this machine, you select it from the store, or you can grab it from a file if you just got it. For developers, you can actually create a test certificate very simply by clicking this button. It's a quick wizard. You create a test certificate, which is I've done here, and then you automatically are applied to having a signed Zap. Very, very easy to do. So what does the user get out of this experience? In a couple of minutes, you set up the Zap. You're good to go. Instead of seeing this message here, your users are going to see a much nicer one. So here we've got a pretend company called Fourth Coffee. We've set all this up with our application settings. It says the publisher can't be verified. And on a Mac, the message is very similar. It's a little more warning-like this. Instead, once we have the digital signing, it's going to grab the icon from our application, in this case the fourth with the leaf, and then it's going to say, nice blue at the top, do you want to install this application? We're good to go. So the user gets a little bit nicer of a message, it's less threatening, and we get the automatic updates and all the other features for the Zap signer. Okay, so before we get to this, let's go look at a demo that uses all these. I love having so many instances of Visual Studio up and running and no crashes. That's good. come out of this kind of technology with Silverlight. It does a lot of neat stuff for you. So you can also load your playlist. And in this case, we're looking through and using this method called Get Media Files. If we flip over to Get Media Files, what it actually does, you'll see here it's got the file access. We're using the environment variable to go in and look at Get Folder Path for the My Music folder. It's going to enumerate the files in all directories. So you have some options here. In there you've got all directories or just the top directory. So in this case you've got subfolders, like if it's your Zune folder. It'll look through all the folders there for you. And to show you with My Music, you've got My Music, Program Files, Recent. It shows you the different folders that you can look at. And then we've got a Get Cached list of files because we're going to cache those, and then we're going to look through all the files. And then this part here, to get in the album art, we're actually hitting a web service that's out there to go get information about that album. So we can hit a web service, tie it all in, and load the picture of the album as well. Pretty cool stuff. All right. So flipping back to our presentation, some other features that we have inside of the out-of-browser elevated permissions applications is if you're running a kiosk type application, you can get access to the full keyboard, all the keys, when you're running in full screen mode. Very nice for you running full screen. Another feature you get is with socket security in elevated permissions, you get, I guess, alleviated security restrictions when you're running sockets. So if you're running out of browser, you can do the sockets as well, which is really nice. You also have a feature called Silent Install. So if you want to install that application on the user's desktop without hitting the internet the first time, maybe through a CD or some kind of network install, what you can do is use this command line syntax. Very simple to do. You take your zap file, and it can be signed. So you take your zap file, and you run the SL launcher process. And this is where it is on my machine. Obviously, if it's different on the users, you want to use some kind of environment variable. And then you set a couple flags. Some of these are optional, but you really want to use these 4 minimally, at least the first 3. So number 1 is, what are you installing? You've got to tell it what to install. That's mandatory. What zap file am I putting on this user's machine? Second, it's optional, but without this, you're kind of handicapped. You really need to do this one. It's the origin. Origin tells it where is it going to look for on the web. And normally you wouldn't say localhost and a port. You would say look on www.johnpapa.net at this address. And that's where they're going to find the updates. That's the service running them. Why is that important? Because without the origin, when updates come, it won't know where to look for them. So you have to tell it, okay, install says put this zap on the machine, but if you update it in a week or a month or a year, the user is not going to get that update unless they know where the origin is. The application has to set that origin. Third option here is setting the shortcut and telling it, do you want to put it on the desktop, the start menu, or both? I always recommend both by installations so the user can find the application. And then overwrite says if it's already there, please overwrite whatever existing versions on the machine. So a little bit of just put it on there. Don't worry if it's the old version. Pretty simple options. There's some others you can look at if you look up silent install or slauncher.exe. Pretty easy to do. So we've talked a lot about different things you can do without a browser. Got about 10 minutes left. I want to show you some good practices, some things we've learned along the way, good stuff to do, some bad stuff not to do, unless you're glutton for punishment, and also get into some Windows Phone 7 applications. So first, always want to check for updates. I mention this a lot because it's real important. You're not going to write an application once and write it perfect the first time, right? Yeah? Okay. Sure. So we're going to write the application. We're going to update it, get it out there. If you're, I noticed they're in the eBay application. Usually once every couple of weeks I get an update for that. It's kind of nice to get an update and know. And notify the users. Because technically you don't have to tell the users you updated their application. They'll know the next time they close it and reopen it if they see something different. But it's nice to let the users know, hey, I've updated this. Please close and restart. Provide an install experience. Number 1 suggestion I have for you. Why is this important? Okay, so let's say you've got an application like Seismic or eBay or something out there on the web or the Facebook Silverlight application. The users may not know what Silverlight is. Shocking, I know. But they may not know what Silverlight is. They go to your web page and you've got a button that says, please install this application. They don't know what they're going to get. Do I really want to install it? Think about it when you used to get all pop-up messages and things. We've kind of been seasoned and conditioned so that we've got a response. And when we see a button to install something, we're a little weary. We're not sure what's going to happen. So you want to provide a good install experience. And so there's some good suggestions we have. I got a full, it's like a 25-page document on different suggestions on how to create a good install experience. It's all publicly available. I've got a link to that if you check my blog. What that document shows you is some good suggestions. Things like when you're going to show the application with a button, don't just put a button up here that says, please install my XYZ app. Show them a picture of what they're going to get. So for doing the eBay application, if you go to their webpage in the garden that they have, which is their beta site, you can see pictures of how you can use the application to list your items. Might be good because think about the consumers for eBay. They're not going to be the technical audience generally. They're going to be any consumer out there. So what are they going to get? So show pictures of what you're going to have. Another one is don't make 25 clicks to install the application. I've seen some of them where somebody will put a EULA up there, some kind of license agreement, and they have to click next 13 times before they actually can install the app. Would you install an app after doing that? It's kind of frustrating. So you don't want to make it to be a frustrating experience. You want it to be easy, simple, make the user want to install it. Another thing you can do, and I've seen people do, is use some kind of a video or even just motion JPEG up on the machine, or maybe just a static image, and show them what they're going to get. So like in the puzzle where you can drag things around, we had one install experience where they've got a picture of the puzzle and a person's fingers on the screen moving the pieces around. It might make you want to try that. That's much better than install now. Create icons. Sounds simple yet again, but it's something I don't see all the time in the applications. I'm going to create nice sharp icons because they show up in the application, on your desktop. They show up in the start menu, and they also show up on the download bar of when you're actually installing the application. So you can create your nice icons. Set your window size and location. Very frustrating for users. I've seen, it's funny, it's almost, again, ingrained in this. You open up some kind of a window, like Internet Explorer, the first thing people do is they put it on the screen where they want it. It's not always where they want it to be. Well, if you open up your application and they have to drag it around all the time, it's kind of frustrating. Maybe put it front and center. Put it where you think it's going to work. If it's a widget of some sort, put it in the upper right. So you can size it and put it in the right location right off the bat. Signing the Zap. Pretty simple to do, as I showed you. You just click that button, create a test certificate to test it out, or you can go purchase one from like Thought or somewhere else like VeriSign. Pretty cheap these days. So some pretty good out-of-browser practices. Other things I look for when I do some kind of code reviews is checking to make sure they're checking all the flags. So I'm using Automation Factory. Check to make sure they actually have the Automation Factory on the machine. So you don't want to take this Excel application that I have from the music player, run it on a Mac. If they didn't have that check on there, it wouldn't be able to find Excel. So it would just run over that, try to invoke Excel, and you'd get some kind of an exception. So you want to make sure that what you're using on the machine is available. You want to make sure you're checking all the flags for network status and connectivity. If you're on an out-of-browser application, network connectivity is huge. You're not in the browser. You don't know what's going to happen next. So let the user know, let the application be self-aware. It's much better to be proactive and check for these status flags than it is to be reactive and wait for the user to try something, fail, and let them know. So check those at different events. So a couple things I wanted to look at here is using the out-of-browser applications, we've got a couple other features. I mentioned that Windows Phone applications all run out of browser. So here we've got an application running Windows Phone 7. feature, if you can call it one feature, in Silverlight 4. It's something we're looking at quite a bit for future versions and revs of Silverlight. So in Silverlight 3, we had a lot of out-of-browser features. In Silverlight 4, the biggest thing we introduced was the elevated truss, so you can do more with the desktop. We're seeing a lot of cool applications because of that. That's kind of where some of the Phone 7 features have come out too. And then we're looking at what clients are asking for now on Windows Phone 7 and on the desktop for the next versions of running out-of-browser applications. So there's a lot of effort being put in that area by our teams, working really hard on it. If you want other information, some other related content we have, we've got some good sessions later today. I know we've got Jordan Knight running some applications later. He was the gentleman who actually put the demo together that was in the keynote, where Nigel so graciously clocked me in the face. Jordan's got a good session, I think, at 5:30 later today, approximately. I've got a session later today on RIA services that you can check out. We've also got a series of phone sessions all throughout the week. And if you're interested more on the phone, yes, another shameless plug, me and a couple of the evangelists at Microsoft are writing a book, be coming out relatively soon on learning Windows Phone. And I also run a TV show on Channel 9 with Microsoft where we do a weekly show every Thursday morning. Here it's Friday. But every Thursday morning in Redmond, we publish a new show on different features of Silverlight. We've done a lot on Windows Phone, some design, and a ton on out-of-browser. With that, we are 1 minute early, but I wanted to thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to stick around. And don't forget to tweet a nugget.